to be great and you're going to learn a lot. So let's go ahead and jump in. You can follow along on this presentation at m360.us/75f2. Again, that's m360.us/75f2. Let's go ahead and cover some of the topics here real quick. Tom, I'll do a pretty high-level intro here, and then maybe we can start to dive in. First thing, we're going to be talking about goals. What kind of goals you want to achieve as a roofer, as a business owner. That's one of the most important things that you really want to do. Looks like we had a couple of audio problems in the beginning. So again, I'm Brandon Lilly. I'm joined by Tom Stoffel, and we're going to be talking about roofer marketing. Again, you can follow along this presentation at m360.us/75f2. The topics we're going to cover today: goals for your business. Another topic is going to be what kind of business model or the core values of your business, what that's going to look like. Some different marketing strategy and differentiators, how to develop a conversion-based site and what that content should look like. Finally, what your lead generation, your lead funnels, channels, and your post-conversion funnels should look like. Tom, anything else that you want to add before we dive in?
No, I think I'll probably have plenty to add when we're going here.
I believe so. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next slide. This is goals. Tom, take me through a high level here, and then let's really start to dive into these different topics. When we're talking about the goals for a roofer, the goals for a business, what does that look like? How do you identify that? Let's walk through this slide here.
Sure. Well, I guess the big thing is, since we're talking about roofing in particular, it's very important, as in any business, but with roofers in particular for this case, to figure out what your goals are in terms of high level information you need to know that you want to do. But there's a lot of things here that's important. Let me start over here. There's a lot of goals that as a business owner you want to have revenue goals. You want to have a bunch of different types of goals. It could be growing your business a certain amount in a year, could be hiring a certain amount of employees, things like that. When we're getting going with marketing, in particular digital marketing with roofing goals, we want to make sure we have a few ones set up front. And those are important for a few reasons. One, you need to know how are we going to be obtaining those goals, right? And what is it we need to be obtaining? That gives us a starting point of how we're going to be kind of diving headfirst into stuff. So some stuff that I talk about when I have clients come in out of the gates is things like revenue goals, number of roofs you're looking for to do in the next calendar year, maybe the next month, maybe the next 6 months, the number of leads you're looking to get, maybe in the same time frames, or maybe it's something more of you have a good lead flow and you want to start building more brand awareness, the goal being to drop your cost per acquisition, things like that. Also, it's important to have short-term and long-term goals when we're talking about that stuff. Now, there's a couple other things that are very interesting I get into with clients when we're first starting. And so some of the basic goals I think all businesses have, but some of the other ones that maybe aren't thought of as much in the roofing industry is maybe you have goals specifically to what industry you want to start working towards, or you want to get more market share in certain types of industries like commercial, residential, multifamily, those kinds of things. So because one of the big things when we start is we want to make sure we nail down all the goals specifically to, the next day, to the next week, to the next year, 2 years down the road, and lay those all out.
Absolutely. I mean, really, you can't set up a good business. You can't have a business plan or a marketing plan, even if you've been in business for years, unless you identify what the goals of the marketing plan or the goals of your strategy are. So let's camp here for a little bit. We've talked about the goals being revenue, number of roofs, number of leads, brand awareness, long-term, short-term goals. How as a business, or especially when you're consulting with roofers, how do you usually walk a roofer or a business through identifying what their goals should be? Because I think we all know a lot of times you have an idea of what your goal is, but as you start kind of diving into that, you realize you've got other goals you need to achieve first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things that we talk about out of the gates is making sure we're keeping goals realistic. And realistic can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different companies, right? But to kind of keep it holistic, keeping goals that are in terms of what you can or want to be, afford to spend on your digital marketing, and figure out what kind of goals we can build off of with those, right?
Right. Because that may be your first goal, right? You want to generate more leads, or you need you want to get more installs, more things like that. But originally the goal might be I need to increase my revenue or my cash flow so that I can afford a marketing program that will equal the more leads and the more installs.
Sure, absolutely. And that's why we're always starting those short-term goals as well as the long-term goals and setting benchmarks specifically with those too, so we know when it's time to start moving up the ladder on some of those other goals. But to your point, it's important to know that if you come in with a smaller budget, let's say you're a business just starting out of the gates, and maybe we don't have a lot of the key things we need, like a reputation or ad fuel to spend out of the gates. You can't spend $10,000 a month. We need to make sure we have those goals in place for the first month, 2 months, 3 months, and making sure we're hitting those goals. But the point is to make sure we're always growing, so we can set those long-term goals out there of, hey, in 2 years from now, I want to be, doing $2 million in revenue, or $5 million, or $10 million, or $20 million in revenue a year. And you can't get there overnight, right? So one thing I like to say a lot is Rome wasn't built overnight. So neither is a good, long-lasting business strategy, especially in the roofing industry.
Absolutely. I think we've all experienced the kind of the fly-by-night companies, or the companies that pop up after a big hailstorm and things like that come out of the woodwork. So by establishing yourself as a long-term roofing company, regardless of if you're new or not, even if you're new into the market, if you set those micro goals and the micro milestones of, okay, first things first is we need to start developing our reputation, because that long-term goal of doing 5 million in business or 5 million in revenue, you need to have a reputation first that you can build on. You need to have a recognizable brand, and then you can work beyond that and start going, okay, we've got a brand, people know us. Now we want to invest some of our capital into marketing so we generate more leads, and it all kind of works together there.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next slide here. Tom, I think you've got kind of an ROI calculator, some examples of different expectations that you can have as a roofer. Now, remember, all these projections are estimates, so we don't want you to look at this and go, oh, well, I can guarantee that I'm going to get a return. But if you're strategic about what you're doing, you can absolutely use these examples as a kind of a benchmark to measure yourself against. Tom, dive into this. Walk me through this. What are we looking at, and what does it mean to a roofing company?
Yeah, just back to what we were talking about, making sure we're starting with the right expectations and the right, goals in mind. One of the ways that we do this out of the gates is put stuff together and in terms of projections and numbers. And, obviously nothing is, like he's talking about, nothing is guaranteed, right, Brandon? It's just this is stuff that we know will work so long as we're hitting these numbers. And so what I like to talk about is, okay, well, what's your budget? Okay, where can we start here? What's a good starting point for your business? And we kind of jump into some other things, and I'll kind of go through the list of things here, and then I'll kind of tie it all in at the end. But things we need to know in order to figure out what your return on investment is going to be. Some we're not going to know out of the gates. We're just simply not going to know it. However, what we were talking about with the first 2, 3, 4 months of marketing, we're gathering data, right? It's a point where we're just accruing tons and tons of data from your marketing channels and strategies that we're optimizing and making better all the time. But once we kind of get that stuff honed in and optimized, we have the ability to say, we know what these numbers are. We just kind of plug and play at that point. With that said, it's always going to get better over time, but it gives us a realistic expectation after a few months when we have good concrete data in there. But big enough sample size really is the key here. So kind of things we need to know to start is, what is a budget that you have to work with? Excuse me. The next thing is, how much is going to cost us to get a visitor to the website? And sometimes that's going to be through paid marketing, sometimes, or an inbound search ad on Google or Bing. Sometimes that's going to be through an organic visit. Sometimes it's going to be a direct visit if you have good branding already. Sometimes that's going to be through social media presence. Maybe we're doing social media management and we're growing organically on social media. Sometimes it's going to be through an outbound campaign strategy on social targeting ads, and where maybe a storm hits and we're putting Facebook ads out there in front of families that are affected by the storm. Those are all going to have different costs associated with how we're going to get somebody to the website. What we want to find out is an average cost to the site overall. And so as an estimate on this one in particular, I have a $25 cost per visit. depends on where you are in the country. Sometimes you're going to have, cost per clicks upwards of $70, $80, and sometimes you're going to have them in $5 and $10. It's all dependent upon the market and how many people are marketing. But that's why we have all these different mediums we can offset some of those higher prices. The point is we want to get that number down as low as we can. So here's usually a good starting point depending upon how long you've been in business and where you are marketing.
It can depend on season too, right? If you're down in Florida and it's hurricane season, those ad costs are probably going to increase pretty substantially compared to another area maybe that doesn't get that kind of inclement weather, and or even just the weather patterns or things like that can really affect that. I like how you pointed it out. It's not just location, but it could be how long you've been in the market, what your competitors are doing, how many competitors you have. But by having all those different channels, you're able to kind of reduce that cost per visitor because you're looking at the overarching picture. Not just, it costs so much. It costs this much for a paid click. Well, that's influenced by a lot of things. So I love that. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, great. And so the next thing is a conversion rate. And so what we're specifically talking about is on-site conversion rate or on-ad conversion rate, meaning if somebody's going to turn into a lead for you. This could be a phone call, a form submission, a text message. We'll get into it a little bit later, but the point is we want to make get rid of as much friction as possible for somebody to reach out to you for more information. We're going to call it a lead, right? So a conversion rate, something typically you're going to start out where you're in the 1 to 3 to 5 range. An industry average is usually about 1 to 3%. We have a pretty good track record around here of starting around 5% because we have the ability to put vast knowledge from the segment that we've done for many, many years, as well as a great product on a website together where we're going to have higher conversion rates out of the gate. With that said, 5% is really good, especially when you first start. Once you've been going for a long time, we get more optimized and we've built out the campaigns more. We've built out the brand more. We've done, stuff over the course of a few years. I have a couple of clients that are, now converting in the 20s and 30%, right? So it's all, keeping it relevant or keeping it, to where you are at the time, right? Mm-hmm. With that said, 5% is a good starting point. The next thing we need to know is what is your sales ratio? Now, this one's a tricky one. And Brandon, I know you've worked with a lot of roofers and a lot of industry specific people, especially in lead generation service industry. And everybody's the best closer in the world, right? Everybody can close at 80%. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll tell you what. That's probably 100% accurate when it's a referral or if it's a buddy or, you had maybe a next door neighbor. So all that is very easy when it's a really good quality lead coming into you. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that even the best roofing companies in the world don't have a conversion to sales ratio of 80%. If you do, you're fantastic and maybe we can help you. You're doing fantastic already. But what I'm doing is I'm starting pretty conservative, of being about a 30%, meaning that 30% of the leads that come to you, you're going to close and turn into a sale, right?
And you want to do that, right? Especially when you're kind of planning out how much do you need to spend to get to what you're trying to get to. You want to stay conservative on your sales numbers and you want to kind of overestimate what you're going to pay to get people to the site. That way, even if at your worst case scenario, you're still profitable or at least break even, which I think should be a business's first milestone. Yeah. Not costing you anything. You're not making anything. Good. That's the way to be. Now you can grow by keeping that kind of, like you said, kind of conservative. Now you can grow from there and you can make changes beyond that.
Yeah. And we're going to get to a kind of a case study here later in the show, but that's glad you brought that up because, oh man, I can't tell you how many times I've had a new account come to me that hasn't, the company didn't break even for 3-4 months. Mm-hmm. And, they're starting to get a little anxious, and I understand that. But it absolutely is a process that you need to kind of stick to because once you get past that initial part and get into the black, it just kind of skyrockets from there. But we'll get into that. And kind of the next step here with our first kind of ROI calculator is going to be a estimated lifetime value of a customer. In this particular case, we're putting an average roof in at about $15,000. And depending upon the size of the roof, what materials, we all know that can change quite a bit. But that's a pretty decent conservative, especially in the Colorado area. That's pretty conservative, or pretty normal, I'd say. And then last thing is your profit margins, right? So how good are we as a company and as a marketing firm of bringing your costs down as low as we can? When we put all that together, your ROI calculator will spit out for every dollar you're putting into your marketing, you're going to be getting $3.60 back, a profit of about $18,000. And now that sounds fantastic. I want to make sure that this is one of those things we're talking about out of the gates, where this is an early or short-term goal of, hey, we want to get here in about 3 to 4 months. And this is something that I do see pretty often.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and you want to consider that also. Like you said, sometimes it can take 3, 4, 5 months for a company to get into the black. So even though we're showing here, you got immediate profit, you're doing this, this is flexible, but what a great way, a great visual to kind of explain. For every dollar you're putting into your marketing investment, you're getting $3.60 back. I mean, you're printing money at that point.
Yeah, not a bad deal.
Let's move on to the next slide. I know you've got another example here, kind of a secondary example of, a little bit after the company's been established, what those cost per clicks and those conversion rates can look like and what that does to your profit. So let's jump over there and walk me through this slide.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're going to get to kind of later in the show, in the presentation here, is there's a lot of work that's going to go into getting here. But this is a scenario of kind of give you a short-term goal, and then here's a long-term goal of where you can be down the road, and given we're doing all the right things. And all the same things are kind of applying here. We're starting with a $5,000 a month budget for ad fuel, and that's for spending on all the different mediums we need to run on. Now, over time, we've gotten a lot better with our organics, right? We've had more direct traffic coming back to the site. We're doing better with our social media, so we have more traffic coming to the site. And we've gotten a cheaper cost per clicks because we've been optimizing and finding the best keywords and best quality scores and so on. Now we're able to get our cost per visitor down to about $15, right? And honestly, that's still pretty conservative. There's a lot lower you can get there depending on how long you're doing this and how good of a job you're doing. But kind of the next thing here would be conversion rates. Right now, we've been working for 3, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, maybe a year, and we're up into the section where we're in we've moved from a 5% conversion rate up to a 10% conversion rate, right? Mm-hmm. Which is very easy to do. Honestly, it just takes time to get there a lot of the times. Same kind of thing here. Sales ratio, I want to keep that at about 30% because I think that's usually pretty industry standard there. Same cost per or estimated lifetime value of that roof stays the same, and our margins stay the same. All of a sudden, by improving just the things that we can work on, by getting cheaper traffic to the site and improving our conversion rate, now all of a sudden we're making a 12-to-1 return versus a $3.60 return. Mm-hmm. And this is just kind of an example of where long-term goals should be, right? Where we can get to in 8 months or a year down the road, right? After we've put in a lot of work into what we're doing.
I love looking at that because we look at the earlier slide and you're making $3.60 on your $5,000 your investment there, $3.60 for every dollar, and then you look at this. It's just an incredible increase with honestly no real additional work from like your sales team or things. They're still closing at the same rate.
Right.
You haven't changed your prices. You haven't, and you could run into a situation where now that you're doing more volume, your profit margins are better because you can buy better. There's all sorts of things that influence this, but a huge percentage of this is all based on optimization and time spent. Very rarely are you ever going to waltz into a marketing company or waltz into a campaign that you launch yourself and get results like this right out of the gate. So I like that we're focusing on this. It takes time, takes energy, and if you do it right, you can see you go from a $3.60, essentially a 4-to-1 return to a 12-to-1 return, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, yep. And I have quite a few case studies of this happening too. It's pretty fun, and we'll get to one of them here a little bit later.
Perfect. Well, talking on that, let's go ahead and move on. We're going to go to the next slide for business model. Tom, talk to me a little bit about positioning of a roofing company. I mean, there's all sorts of different kind of niche markets that people can get into, but talk to me a little bit about this. How does a roofing business position themselves? Where can they find success in there? And why does it make sense to maybe narrow a focus instead of trying to be, the Walmart of roof installs.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, you just can't do them all, especially not out of the gate. It's just, there's not many companies out there even now that have been around for 20 plus years that have the ability to do everything, right? So it's important to create a niche for yourself, carve out a part of the market that you can really be the best in, right? And as we were talking about a minute ago, in all roofers know this, depending where you are in the country, you might have a very different market. You might have a very different way of approaching your market. You might have to, just because of like in Florida, you have hurricanes, and on the coast over there in the middle of the country, we have a lot of hailstorms, stuff like that. So you're going to be putting yourself in a position of what do you need to focus on in order for you to grow your business the best way possible, depending upon your location, and really got to carve out your niche with that. So one thing I always talk to my accounts about with this is, let's make sure you're focusing on one thing that, especially out of the gates, that you feel like you can really be very good at, right? So that could be retail, right? That could be you're in an area where you don't have a lot of storm damage and you need to focus on just new roof installs, or maybe new build installs, that kind of stuff, right? Well, that's really a retail market. So we have to mold our campaigns very different than we would if it's, for example, in the storm damage area of the country. With that said, too, with the storm damage, that's a very interesting one, because there's two different ways that I've always worked with this. You have a storm catcher and you have a storm chaser, right? Two completely different ways to segment out the same part of the market too. So again, you just got to know what you want to do and then build a brand around that, so it's easy to market, right? A couple other things you want to make sure you're doing is, do you want to focus on brand awareness, or do you want to be focusing on inbound marketing, right? That's a very different way of doing it also. And obviously both can be very effective depending upon how you do it. Commercial, residential, do you want, some commercial, big ticket items, maybe bigger jobs that take longer, you need a little more capital to get them done. Maybe residential, you have quicker turnarounds and good profit margins and good cash flow from, right? Do you want to focus on one or the other? It's really hard to do both. Repairs versus re-roofs and all this kind of balances out here. And you really have to pick a niche of what you want to start with and build your brand around that.
Yep. Now you always want to be ready to pivot, right? Especially I've always found this with like the new construction, that new construction is not always going to be there. You're not always going to be growing and experiencing that. But this is a great opportunity. If you focus here and you become really well known for what you do, you build that brand awareness, people know who you are. Well, eventually a couple of years down the road, you're going to be getting into repairs and re-roofs and residential and things like that. So you got to be prepared to change as the market changes as well.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Let's move on to our next slide here. I'll talk about the strategy and kind of those differentiators. So depending on the business model, obviously you have to change the strategy. So regardless of the business model that you're in or what you've chosen, here's a couple of strategies. Tom, I'd love to hear your opinion on all these, how you've seen them work, and kind of your recommendations here.
Yeah, well, and kind of going back to the last slide, when you do kind of pick a strategy or the segment of the market you want to attack, the next step is figuring out how you're going to do it, essentially, right? And that's going to be your strategy and your differentiators. What's making you different or better than your competition? And this is one thing. These are kind of a list of things that I go through with my clients, and usually through conversation you pull a lot of good stuff out of here. But I have some bullet points here of things that that are very important to focus on, right? So again, start with commercial residential. You can't really focus on both. You can focus on one and then move in another one down the road. With that said, brand offering, right? Brand's offering is more along the lines of, what are the different brands of roofing materials that you're offering? And we'll get into why that's important here in a minute. But, having the ability to offer several different types of brands and styles are very important to different types of people, right? So if you're in a residential market, you want to make sure that you have the ability to offer all types of different shingles or metal or tile, whatever it may be that the client's interested in. If you don't offer all that, then again, it's very important to make sure you're focusing on just one segment of the market and not spending money on some other parts, right?
Yeah, you don't want to worry about, the metal roof installs if you just don't do that.
Yep, exactly right. And through through your brand and marketing and the message that you're giving and the type of inbound leads you're doing, it's very easy to control that, but you got to kind of know what you're looking for out of the gates, right?
Mm-hmm.
A big one is call to actions, right? And so, I'm sorry, roofing types kind of plays back into the offering too, is maybe what type of roof it's going to be. Metal, asphalt shingles, what have you. Call to actions. This might be one of the biggest ones, and it's in my mind so over not done right ever, right? It's overthought and then under delivered. So a lot of people really focus on a free estimate, a free inspection. Those are great. Everybody, if you're a good roofer and you're doing things the right way, you're going to offer that, right? If you can't offer a free roofing a free roof inspection, then someone's going to go to the next roofer. So that's almost a given these days. But you got to come up with something that's a little more niche, right? Something that's a little more clever, something that's going to entice somebody. So I have a bunch of different examples. I have a lot of clients that specialize in storm restoration, and they have a certain 25-point inspection system they go through, and that's like a really good niche offering outside of just a call to action. Or I have another client that always talks about shingles the same price, or metal the same price as shingles, right? That's a very good call to action because it's a differentiator. And it's more than just the average free inspection, right? So the call to action is very important, and that ties into everything we're doing. And something all my clients, we focus on very heavily once we get going with stuff.
I love it. And you've got all sorts of different things here that people can use to set themselves apart, the differentiators there. And I love that. I've experienced it myself. You look for something and you automatically are going to be looking for that the free inspection or something like that. I anticipate that's going to be there, right? I anticipate that's automatically what the business is going to do. So differentiating yourselves with discounts, affiliations, financing, like you've got written here, things like that, I think really add to exactly what the consumer is looking for. I know what I'm going to get, but if you can offer me just a little something more, I'm much more interested in giving you my information and accepting a phone call from you, letting you come over to my house, or if you're like you said, if you're doing commercial or anything like that, those call to actions have to change then too, depending on the business model.
Yep, absolutely. And things that are really important too to play off that is when somebody gets to a website, they need to trust you right away, right? And part of that plays into design of the website and all that, and that's super, super important. I don't want to discount that in any way, but part of the design comes into what somebody sees psychologically when they see your brand and your business. Like, who are you associated with? Do you have awards? Do you have certifications? Have you been around for a long time? Do you have a lot of experience? Those things play into people's minds very much so, even if they're not looking for them. So if you can talk about how, you have accreditations with, depending on where you are, right? Maybe in Colorado, you have the Colorado Roofing Association. If you're down in Texas, you have the Roofing Contractors Association of Texas. There's a bunch of others in every other place you go, but the more you're associated with that kind of stuff and just put a badge on your site, the better that's going to look from a consumer standpoint, right?
Absolutely.
Same thing with certifications and awards and accolades. If you have certifications, which you do as a roofer, you need to put that kind of stuff on your site, right? And obviously, as a roofer, that the higher accredited certification you have with some of the major brands, you can start offering some better written warranties and labor and material warranties, right? With that said, make sure you are always putting that stuff on. Every time you have the ability to put that in front of somebody, your JF Master Elite certification or a CertainTeed Select Shingle Master, all those. The more certifications you can put on your site, the better it's going to be. Again, building that trust with the client, right? Building the trust and getting rid of friction with how they're viewing your brand.
Absolutely. I think that actually brings us over to our next slide. We're talking about the site and your ads and your ad copy. and the website and how they all have to work together to be that number one salesperson, and how you can get your brand message across. This is a big part of increasing the conversion rate, right? You know, conversions and click-through rate and all of that, a lot of it is going to depend on the site. So you covered a little bit of it, but talk to me a little bit more about the content side of designing a conversion-based website.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were talking about before, back to the beginning, it was, how do we increase that ROI? Well, one of the big factors we talked about was increasing your conversion rate. And so once you have kind of everything dialed in and as your differentiators of what you offer that is going to be better than your competition, now it's time to tie it all in together and put it in something that's digestible to a consumer, right? And very easily digestible. So a couple things. Your website is always going to be your number one sales rep. All right. Before anybody reaches out to you, they're going to be doing a lot of research about you. They're going to be on your website. They're going to be reading, diving into the About Us page. They're going to be diving into your rewards page. They're going to be diving into, testimonials page, everything, right? And so making sure your website has everything in it that you need as far as your value proposition, and put it all in one place. That's the best sales rep you can have, right? Before they even talk to one of your sales rep, they're going to trust you based on your website. Furthermore, they're not going to trust your website until they trust your ad copy, right? Or they're not going to get to your website unless your ad copy and stuff is enticing. So one of the things we talk about here a lot is making sure we're winning on the front lines with higher click-through rates and lower cost per visitor to the site using all of our different channels, right? So one thing that I have found is, content is king, especially with Google, with search engines, especially organics, but king of content is video. Anymore, I hate to say it, but America doesn't really read too much anymore, right? Not everybody, but, people engage way more now with content or with video, right? Sitting on your, zoning out at home on your phone and having YouTube up or having Facebook up and scrolling and seeing videos. That's really how people digest information anymore. Mm-hmm. So making sure you can get all your value proposition into a video to be able to put in front of somebody into the right targeted audience, the right demographics, whether it be Facebook or YouTube. And that's really kind of the best way to get people to the site. With that said, too, that also carries over to text ads and to other types of ad copy on social media, where we need to have the best assets and we need to have the best ad copy. But all that, again, starts from what your value proposition is. What is making you different, right? What's going to entice somebody to go with you over a consumer or a competition, right? So having all that spelled out in the beginning, again, starts to help now.
I love that you've got better ad copy and ad assets win the battle, but the branding and the value proposition really wins the war. I love that. Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
Absolutely. And really you see that all the time, getting people to the site so a couple things here, if I could go into it, Brennan. One, if you're on Google, you're going to have 4 ads there right in front of you, right? And what ad stands out the most is probably going to get clicked on the most. So that's winning the battle, right? Same thing with Facebook, especially if you're in a scenario where you have a hurricane that comes through or you have a massive hailstorm that comes through. Well, I guarantee you as a homeowner, they're going to get inundated with roofing company ads, right? Mm-hmm. But is yours the best? Does your content stand out among the rest? You're going to win that battle, and then your website's going to take care of the rest.
I love it. And you kind of started bringing up a couple of different points here. So let's move to our next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about the lead funnel. You already talked about Google ad search and the positioning that you can have there. We talked a little about Facebook, and especially on Facebook because of the demographic marketing and the geographic targeting and things like that. You can get really specific. So talk about the different strategies that we can employ and how that really impacts the lead flow and the lead funnel that we can build around these channels.
Yeah. So kind of back to the beginning and always setting back to expectations and goals, right? So what do do we have the ability to do everything we're trying to do? Are we trying to build brand awareness as well as build inbound leads right now for as cheap as we can, right? We know the more brand awareness and the better we're doing on an organic standpoint, the lower our cost per acquisition is going to be because the cost per visitor to the site is going to go down. But if we don't have the ability to do that out of the gates, we're going to have to focus on just like an inbound strategy and get to the the brand awareness kind of stuff down the road. And that's really, again, part of the reason why things get better as you go. With that said, we really need to focus on a couple things out of the gates. One's the best way that I've always harped on, and through many, many years of data, I know that the best cost per acquisition is always going to be from inbound marketing, right? Someone actively looking for you right now. And you want to make sure you're in front of them, and then obviously do all the other things, right? We need to have their website and have the ad copy that's going to take care of that part. But if we're not in front of them when they're looking for us, then what's the point? What are we doing marketing for?
If they can't find you when they're searching for you, you don't exist.
We can have the best website on the internet, but if nobody comes there, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
So back to kind of that expectations is what can we put into it in order to get the amount of traffic to the site we need from an inbound strategy, right? So part of how we build this all together is the big thing is inbound first. We call it top placement ads at Marketing 360. Essentially, it's our proprietary program for inbound search ads on Google and Bing. And the reason we're better is quite honestly because most other companies will set it and forget it, right? And we don't do that. Part of the strategy we have here is making sure we're always in the campaigns, optimizing and making them as best as we can make them, throughout the course of the, account life here, right? So,
and you can think about that from a perspective of a business owner as well. If you're a roofer and you own the business, you may not have, you can run Google, anyone can run Google AdWords. You can set up the account, pick your keywords, build an ad group, all of that kind of fun stuff if you wanted to spend the time. But even beyond that, if you want to get to that level of having a low cost per click, high conversion rate, great sales rate, like you said, you can't just set it and forget it. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into managing a campaign effectively if you want to get to that level where you're achieving the goals that you already put in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of time and effort. Don't beat past that one. That one's a very important one. Yep. But kind of moving along there's a lot of other things we get to be doing during strategies, right? And so while we will be focusing on inbound, because you absolutely have to be there when they're looking for you, building a fantastic outbound strategy for brand awareness and getting in front of people when they need you, but they haven't been to your website yet. Those are two very important things. And that's what we call social targeting ads. And there's a lot of different ways we can do that, depending upon, again, kind of budgets and what we have to work with there. But between Google display campaigns, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pandora ads, LinkedIn ads, you have the ability to get in front of some very targeted audiences and really build brand awareness. But like we were talking about, getting in front of people when they don't know about you, especially if they need you, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if your value proposition is the best. And we've already been through that, right? We've already harped on that and figured out the best way to market it, right?
And I know some people get a little nervous around the phrasing outbound campaign. Keep in mind, we're not talking yellow pages, billboard, and radio here. That's not what we're looking at. This is targeted social, demographic, location-based targeting towards people that should fit a kind of that microcosm of specific customer audiences. There's a big difference between just blasting out there and hoping that you reach the person that you need to, and specifically laser targeting the demographic that you're attempting to reach. So social targeting ads are by far one of my favorite ad programs. We've actually done another webinar on this before, which we'll link to after we go offline here.
Yeah, and to build off what you said there, that is a common misconception of outbound, like you're talking about. This isn't the old days anymore. We can track literally everything. Don't tell Facebook that, but we have the ability to be very, very granular and specific about who we're targeting with our outbound campaigns. Which, when we're tying it back into the cost per visitor to the website, all of a sudden, the more outbound campaigns you do, very targeted with your audiences, and you have the right message and you have the right ads, all of a sudden, you're going to find you're going to have a ton more organic traffic coming to your site under brand name search and stuff like that. And what does Google then do? They start to realize that you're a very trustworthy source, one that they want their customers searching for a roofer to find, and all of a sudden now your organics are working too. So it's, again, all those strategies work very well together, right?
Yep. So let's talk about remarketing here real briefly. I know that we cover remarketing on just about every webinar that we do because it is such a powerful tool. So talk to me about this. How do you use remarketing? It looks like we've got a lot of similar opportunities in our outbound, or I like to call them that pre-intent. I didn't know I was looking for this, but turns out I need it. How do we fit remarketing into this kind of lead funnel?
Well, let's talk about roofers in particular. So let's talk about roofers in particular, especially after a storm happens. Again, they're going to be inundated with people, right? They're going to be inundated with this roofer and that roofer and this roofer, and they all, they're the best, right? They're all the best.
Oh yeah.
Well, how do you differentiate yourself? One, like we've talked about with the ad copy and your value propositions and your website and all that, but now they've met us, they've talked to us, they've also met and talked to, 20 other roofing companies, right? And they're going to continue. But how do you get them to go with you over your competition? Well, you got to keep telling them about yourself. Keep telling them what you've told them and tell them again, right? Then tell them why you told them. But it's just the remarketing. You want to stay in front of them, keep them top of mind. It's renting mental space in someone's mind. And we can do that in many different ways, right? So one of the cool ways we do that, especially if a storm happens, where I want to put your video that we've created in front of a homeowner that was in the affected area. I'm going to say that people who watch more than 50% of the video were probably pretty interested in the video or probably interested in your services. Well, now I know that person is engaged with us. Now we're going to follow up with remarketing to them and get them a different message and then a different message. And so we've told them everything we need to tell them. And then they can't really ignore us anymore, right?
Yeah, it's perfect, and it falls into the marketing law of 7, right? A consumer needs to see or at least be kind of in front of or have an ad in front of them for a business 7 times before they choose to really engage with it, and that's what this remarketing does. If you reached out, you filled out a form. I've done this before. I've reached out to 5, 6, 7 different companies. They all start reaching back to me. Everything just kind of blurs together, right? It all blends together. They're all this kind of company. They all are the best. They all offer the same thing. It's the companies that I start to see their brand, their logo, their offering, their services in front of me more often. Yeah. When I'm doing my research, that's who I go back to. So remarketing is an incredibly powerful tool that you absolutely have to use.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest by far.
Absolutely. Let's move on to our next slide. This is kind of tying all these channels together. So Tom, walk me through this. What are we seeing here?
Yeah. And this is kind of the example I was going to come back to. And I think this is very important of talking through or visually explaining why everything we just talked about is so important, right? And this is a very good example of a client who came to me that started on a much smaller budget. So our goals in the interim, in the first 2-3 months, were much smaller. And as we grew over time, that changed our goals, right? They got bigger. They got more advanced. We started putting money more into those other segments that were more brand awareness. We started putting money into more retargeting. We started putting more money into inbound. And we just started turning everything up and building on new strategies. And basically what this graph shows you is, and I know you can't see it when you hover over it because it's a screenshot, but in the beginning, the first 2 months, I think we had somewhere about 50 conversions. So 50 leads that came to them, good qualified leads. And that was in the first 2 months of marketing. Fast forward to, 2.5, almost 3 years later, the last 2 months, we had 800 leads in 2 months. We're at 400 leads a month right now. Mm-hmm. But it's proven, there's a bunch of examples we can show of this, but this is a very good one in that when you stick with it and keep doing the things that you need to be doing, how good the program is and how good digital marketing is, right?
Yep. I love that you can see here that this is just the time. Now, if you waltz in and you go, I need 400 leads a month,
right?
All right. Well, there's a cost associated with that. Sometimes the cost isn't just the investment. Sometimes the cost is time. There's for everything that related to marketing, there's always a cost of time and talent, as well as the initial investment of the financing needed to get you there. But I love that you can just see that progression right up over close to 3 years. You go from 50 conversions a month to 200 or what was it, 400. That's incredible. I love seeing this.
Yeah, and that kind of exactly what you said is why those goals are so important, and more importantly, being realistic with those goals, right? Out of the gates, everybody wants to come and say, hey, you guys are miracle workers, and well, you know what, I'm really good at my job, but I'm not, not magical, right? But it's a true point, is that you can still come and start your marketing and start your business with a smaller budget and just stick with it, and it gets better. And the next month it gets better. Then you can start investing more. And in this particular case, I think these people were spending about $1,000 a month, and now we're spending well over $20,000 a month, right? Mm-hmm. So, but our cost per acquisition has actually dropped significantly from when we first started. So, just a true testament of how impactful all this can be, so long as we do everything the right way.
Right. And talking about that, and retaining customers and growing them. If we go to our next slide, you've got the post-conversion funnel. Just because you get a lead that comes in and they gave you their information, honestly, that doesn't really mean a lot until you can turn that lead into a sale. And obviously that's the goal. So creating that lifetime customer and bringing them back to you, keeping them engaged with you. I would say, especially in roofing, it's not always that immediate. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and go, it would be nice, a new roof. It's not going to happen in 24 hours. There's a long sales cycle associated with that. So talk to me a little bit about the post-conversion. After I've given you my information, what does a good roofer do with it to keep me engaged?
Well, as we've talked about pretty extensively here, the inbound is super important, right? Or the inbound, nurturing that lead, right? Getting the lead. And there's a lot of time and effort and exhaustion and blood, sweat, and tears from the marketing side, from being on the boots on the ground, right? It costs a lot to get that lead. Well, how do we keep building on that ROI once we've kind of maxed out everything else, right? Now we really need to focus on doing a better job of turning those leads into actual sales, right? Mm-hmm. And so with that said, we have a lot of cool talent and technology here at Madwire Marketing 360 that allows us to help nurture those leads for you. And it starts with a CRM, right? You got to be able to manage those customers coming in, seeing when the last time you talked to them was, seeing what they need, just kind of being on top of everything, so you're not dropping the ball with any of your clients, right?
That's the worst thing you could do. I mean, even let's say you're only getting 10 leads a month. That's 120 leads a year. Nobody is going to be able to remember absolutely everything about every lead that they spoke to. So a CRM is just incredibly important. I don't mean to jump in and interrupt you, but I've talked with hundreds of business owners that don't want to make that transition, or they think they can do it. So I love to harp on this whenever I get the chance. In fact, here at Marketing 360, we have a free CRM. It's free for life. We don't charge you anything for it. So I highly recommend you sign up for that. We'll put a link to that here at the end of the webinar. But this is a great way to get started, because I'll tell you what, Tom, if we reference your client from earlier, if they waited until they were getting 400 leads a month just to start using a CRM to manage that data, my guess is they would be a lot less effective at converting those into actual sales than they are currently.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we probably have done a segment on CRMs, or we're going to, but you could go on that for hours. There's so much you can do with it. The power in a CRM is amazing. So, and the fact that ours is free when you market with us and ongoing actually after that is pretty phenomenal. So, kind of the next big thing that actually ties in with the CRM too is email marketing, right? And so once you have a lead, well, how do you keep talking to them? How do you keep the chain of communication open, right? Especially if they may have requested a quote from you, but they need to get a quote from a couple other roofers, right? Yeah. Well, we can do a lot of things with automation, so there's no work for you, with email drip campaigns. Again, reiterating that value proposition, reiterating how professional you are, talking again about how good your communication is with clients, that kind of thing, right? And re-harping on your value proposition with them. That's huge. And one of the best ways to do that is going to be through an email campaign, as well as retargeting ads here, right? So once I do have somebody who has converted, I can help nurture that person into a sold customer with continuing to build on that value that you offer as a brand through other retargeting measures too, right? So those two coupled together do a fantastic job of kind of reminding that person of, hey, these are the best. This is the best company to go with. I just need to go with them. I just need to go with them, right? They keep telling me how good they are. I just need to go with them. So very effective. Kind kind of the next big thing that you need to have there is feedback and reviews. And so one of the best ways that you can retain a customer is make sure you get their feedback, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? If you can't get better as a company because you don't know how your customers are feeling about you afterwards, then you're never going to get better. So getting feedback from them, and if it's good, make sure you are doing your best to get reviews out of them, because that just adds to all the value of the rest of your your brand and everything, right? If someone searches for you and you have a great reviews, reputation, thank you, then they don't need to go search anywhere else. They already have it. They know how well you've done for other people, and they tell you that, right? Mm-hmm. So.
Absolutely. And I'll take this opportunity to plug Top Rated Local. Partnered with them, topratedlocal.com. Great opportunity to gather reviews. You've got the opportunity to build some trust with a trust badge on the site. Again, that's free. There's no cost to utilize the review platform. So another thing, and Tom, I know that you've got clients that are all over that. So that's a great opportunity for people as well. Yeah.
One of the great things about that is it's an aggregate too, right? So for roofers, it's very important to have reviews on as many different platforms as you can, right? So you want them on Google, you want them on Facebook, you want them on Houzz, you want them on Yelp, you want them everywhere, right? So one thing that Top Rated Local does is it aggregates all and pulls them all into one place and puts them right on your website, so somebody doesn't have to go find out about you. Mm-hmm. One thing that people do when they leave your website is they do a lot of things with they always want to find out more about your brand and reputation. So they're going to do things like search brand name and then the word reviews to find out more about you. So if you can kind of take that step out of it and keep all those reviews on site so they can just see it all from all the different locations, even better. You don't lose that person off the site.
Yep, you're able to more effectively control the conversation and provide better customer service because you're able to provide what the customer is looking for right there at their fingertips.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the last thing that really is important here, there's the two kind of bullet points. One was do something unexpected, right? You go to dinner and you sit down and you expect to have a good meal. When it comes out in a timely manner, it's the right temperature, the person was attentive, it was a good meal. You don't go and write on Yelp or another review platform about how good it was. But they might do something. They might go write a good review if you do something completely unexpected and say, hey, you know what? You're a great customer. I see you come in all the time. I want to buy this meal for you today. And I want to give you this gift card for another person to come in next time, or whatever it may be. Just, something unexpected they weren't expecting. Now all of a sudden you're going to have a customer for life, right? So I have a bunch of customers that do things that send like a little gift pack after they do a roof install. Might be some cookies or something, right? But you know what? They weren't expecting that. And it just goes above and beyond than what you guys were. You're just not a roofing company that came, took their money, put a roof on their house, and left, right? So something unexpected is always good. That's going to help increase the lifetime value of that customer. And we have a lot of things in place here that, working with other third parties, that we can help facilitate that. So and the last point there was marketing materials. One of the things that we offer with Marketing 360 is creative services, right? And how important is it that when you step into as a sales rep, you step into a house doing your sales pitch in the living room with the family, and you have to be able to leave something with them, like a folder or some really good, well done professional material. Well, I can tell you the consumer's sitting there paying attention to all this, and they know that their consumer scheme of how they feel about your business is associated with every single step of the way. So good marketing material to bring into homes to kind of show again how professional you are is another thing that is highly recommended to do. And again, something that we can help offer for you.
Excellent. All right, let's move into our one of our last slides here. Kind of changing direction just a little bit, but we're going to talk about really briefly having a strong social media presence. This isn't necessarily related to a marketing campaign. We're not talking about outbound advertising or inbound or things like that. This is talking about another opportunity to have your presence online where people live. The statistics are somewhere, between 80 and 90% of adults in America are on Facebook. A huge percentage are also on Instagram. Obviously, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, and it's owned by Google. So when we're talking about social media, just your website's not enough. It's just not enough anymore. And people look to social media to be that piercing the corporate veil. This is your opportunity to be human, and to connect with people that way. So we've got a couple examples here of different posts on social media, kind of what that looks like, different directions you can go. Tom, walk me through this slide here.
Yeah. So to kind of play off what you're saying there, one of the big reasons why we do social media and why it's so advantageous for business these days is that a lot of times where we were talking about, people will go look for reviews on a brand right after they've been there. Nowadays, especially with millennials getting older, they're going to go look on Facebook and figure out what they can deduce from the company on Facebook. Making sure that you have a social presence on there and you are communicating with your clientele, with people engaging with your business, that goes a long ways. It's unbelievable how much it goes. Furthermore, even if they don't go to your page to kind of check in to see how good you're doing on social media, they will be part of the ecosystem now, and they'll be starting to see those posts as they're scrolling through their feed on Facebook or Instagram or anything. And this is what we call more micro moments, right? Where, again, it goes back to the rule of 7. You have to touch somebody at least 7 times before they're going to turn into a customer, or at least a lead for you, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this micro moment is they're going to be scrolling through and they're going to start seeing your branding on there too, right? And this is going to be a little bit different from retargeting, because it's something more, they're communicating with their ecosystem. They're communicating with their customers and stuff this way. So social media posts, social media management is a fantastic way to continue to engage with these people. And it just builds your brand on a social media presence now too. And it's not too far down the road where, some of these other companies like a Facebook are going to have a search engine built in that are going to be, hey friends, does anyone know a good roofer near me? And guess what? If you've been on there for the last few years and you've been building your reputation and your brand there, you're going to be showing up on top. Mm-hmm. So the amount of value that's added into this is just astronomical. There's so much stuff to talk about with it.
Well, Facebook already has its recommendations, right? People can go out and they ask for recommendations. And I'll tell you what, if you've done a great job of converting leads to customers and then engaging with them, creating that lifetime value, if you are on social media where they are and where, a huge percentage of the American population lives, then they become your brand ambassador and they're able to connect with you, and they will share that, and they'll share that their experience. And that's part of a conversation that you don't even have any control over, but you've built that foundation where now your brand ambassador is selling your company and your roof for you. Exactly. At that point, the sales team doesn't have to do anything. They just pick up send them an email, pick up the phone, show up, and now it's time to build a roof.
Right.
It's excellent. All right. Last slide here, summing it up. Tom, do you have anything else to add? You've been incredible. Thank you so much for helping us out with this and talking about roofer marketing.
Yeah, you know what? I guess I'll just sum it up with the things that I find to be very, very important is you can't do one thing and expect it's all going to work. You have to be working on every aspect of your business, especially in the digital realm at the same time. And if you're not, you're never going to grow, right? So a couple things to leave with is make sure that your expectations are in line with your budgets of what you can afford to get done. And then once we keep building there, start increasing that budget so you can do more and more and more. And, again, back to what I've seen happen in the past with companies coming in with, they did $1-2 million in revenue the year before. Now, 4 or 5 years later, they're at 20 or 30 million in revenue, right? It's just one of those things that you just got to build on it. You all got to work together, and you got to trust the process.
Excellent. All right. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you do want to follow up on this presentation, you can always access this slide directly at m360.us/75f2. We have additional resources for you for free, youtube.com/marketing360. We do these webinars every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Tom, again, thank you so much for joining us here. Everyone else, thanks for sticking with us and watching. Thank you so much, and happy marketing.